Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I am Mark Carbon, and with me, of course, is Mr. Matt Germain. And today, Matt and I have a very special guest. We're talking about Josh Weaver, the curator of the Tampa Baseball Museum. We're going to be talking with him. We're going to be talking about the Tampa Bay Rays. We're talking about the opening week and all the insanity that has followed from that. And, of course, that little move across the water to George Steinbrenner Field. I keep wanting to say stadium, guys. But welcome, everybody. How you doing?
Excellent. We're living the dream up here in Canada. I know you guys are a little bit warmer than we are still, but I think we're doing well.
How about you, Josh?
Doing well. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, we've been talking time and again about what's going to happen with the new Trop, the development over in St. Pete, all the back and forth between the city and the county and all the executives at the Rays. And it's just anytime anybody would ask me, well, what's happening with it? What's with the stadium? When's it going to happen? I was like, but just stop talking to me. Walk away. Matt knows this about me. It's just fingernails on the chalkboard. But I was not surprised when we heard that the Rays are basically, they're going to walk away from that whole March 31st deadline and putting together a whole new stadium. Now, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here. There's still obligation for the Rays and the city of St. Pete through 2028 for a stadium for them to be able to play there. So they're going to have to invest to keep it working.
So, yeah, I think there's new news today that came out about that, actually. It's funny that you bring it up. But I think, assuming, I imagine there's certain conditions that have to be met for that to be the case. So St. Pete, I know when they initially looked at it, they seemed to think that it was going to take until 2028 to even get it fixed initially, right? And now they're saying it's not just the roof that has to be fixed, it's a bunch of the other stuff that's the infrastructure inside the building as well, which may take longer. So I think what you're going to see happen is probably, at some point, a decision being made that we're not going to be ready for 2026 season, and then they'll have to make some sort of deals. What those look like, I mean, you could go from left field all the way to right field. There's no, everything is possible, and that's kind of the way it's been with the stadium issues. Like you pointed to, there's been no certain direction with any of this at any point in time, and it's unique. Let's just put it that way.
You're too kind. You're too kind. There's an article the Tampa Bay Times just put up a little while ago, and today is actually Wednesday, April the 2nd. One of the pieces they're talking about is the roof replacement includes $100,000 set aside for tariffs imposed on imports. So,
that was a low level, Mark, because they're coming out with new ones every day. So who knows?
I know we're going to double those up, baby. But what it does show to me is some forethought about things going to happen. Sort of like when you're planning on building a new stadium and saying, everything's going to be perfect. We've got timelines. We got deadlines. It's all going to happen. And if it doesn't, well, the whole world implodes. I mean, that was kind of the plan with the Rays, and it is just sad. Give us some words here, Josh. So don't let me just bounce this ball around without saying something back.
I think, it's going to be interesting, like you said, if they are not ready for next year and all the work they've done this year, it's Steinbrenner Field. It just seems logical. I mean, I don't know anything anybody else doesn't know, but it just seems logical that if it turns out that it ain't broke this year at Steinbrenner Field, I could see them just continuing there. I mean, they've done a lot. They work well with the Yankees, obviously, to make this happen, because you talk about a monumental task to get two teams that, fight each other like cats and dogs in the American League East, but somehow can get together and have enough mutual respect for one another as teams to get this accomplished. I don't know that you could just make this mix with any other team. I think it's a special relationship between the Rays and the Yankees, and it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we're at the very beginning of the season, but to see how these two teams are playing so far this season, this could be a long season and a long good season at Steinbrenner Field. I
do want to say something though. Like, the Yankees are not doing this out of charity, right?
Oh, true.
Like they are making $11 million with a franchise affiliate that probably never brings half of that in over the course of a season. So like they're making out a little bit of money. So essentially the Rays are paying for one of their lower end players on their roster, or enriching their affiliate, in some way, shape, or form. So they may pay for some renovations down the road with this money. They may, use it in whatever way they want. So I definitely I agree with you. You're preaching to the choir when it comes to the Rays staying there. I would pitch a tent. I would start building things and I would claim it as mine. Like the commercials that they used to have about the Volkswagen where the guy goes over and he licks the handle and he says, "It's mine now." You can't have it back. That's basically the way I see the Rays with Steinbrenner Field. They gotta do something that makes it theirs forever, where the Yankees are like, "Yeah, we don't want that back. Thanks."
Well, I would love to see that, man. I don't know if I'd be licking any car door handles, but geez, that would. There's a lot. Never mind. I can go down a dark road there. Uh, but
And Mark, we shouldn't lick the railings at Steinbrenner either.
No.
yeah, I think that's probably a great choice. I've heard they cleaned it up, but still, oof. It's interesting though, watching the games at Steinbrenner.
Mhm.
One, you've got a full house.
Yeah.
You've got what, a little less than 11,000 folks in there. And it's great too, because if you were to get a chant together, even if there's only 50 of you, it's going to sound like the whole freaking stadium because you're such a large part of that 10,000 or 11,000 folks that are there. I've enjoyed watching the crowd, but I do miss somebody. And I think I may have sent you all a note on this, and that's the Critchfields. And if the name doesn't mean anything to you folks out there, the Critchfields are a very essential part of every broadcasted game of the Rays at Tropicana Field. Because when they have that shot and you're looking directly at that batter, right behind them, the first two seats just to the left, you would see a man and a woman who are there at every game. And they were both always dressed very well. They looked very proper. And that's the Critchfields. And I don't see them out in the heat and the sun out there, man. I don't know if they got a special place up in the press box farm or what, but I miss those folks.
Mark, it's funny because I actually was thinking about the same thing. And it's like there's such a staple. You can almost figure out when Jack and Mary are going to take get their ice cream, get their popcorn. You can kind of time the game by what they're doing in the course of a game and what they're eating. So no, it's funny, but I thought the same thing.
What I kept thinking about was how it still looks like spring training. I still haven't been able to detach into the regular season because it still has a little bit of that spring training feel to the stadium as well.
I wonder if the players have some of that too. I mean, even though they've got this whole Rays branding, the supposedly 3,000 pieces have been replaced in there. It's still because the size and you've actually been inside or should be on that field before as a player. You've played there in spring training. What's different? I don't know, man.
Well, I think you look at the MLB stadiums, the biggest difference that I see is not only like, yes, the stands are only go to a certain height, like they're not as tall as the other MLB stadiums, but it's the outfield. Like
Yeah.
there's almost literally no fans in the outfield. And to me, that's the potential eventually is to add those fans, outside of the outfield, eventually adding tiers, doing whatever you do if you end up staying there. But I think that's the ambiance thing. So as a player that went through the minors, you would have seen that at every stadium you went. Like there's never any stands in the outfield when you're in the minor league, stadiums. So you still feel like you're going back in time. So really for some of the Rays guys, it's like reliving their youth, or for the guys that we could talk about right now, like the Mangum, Mead, Meisner, it makes them feel at home. To them, it's not a foreign environment. It's almost a little bit more welcoming for them to stretch their legs out, get their feet under them in that stadium because it is familiar. They've been there before, and it's still feels a little bit more like what they're used to or what they grew up with. So I see it as a really good thing for a young team that has a lot of ingredients and players coming up from the minors this year. and then potentially next year, like what Josh was saying, with them potentially sticking around another year. Then Carson Williams, Chandler Simpson, all those guys get acclimated in a very, very, very comfortable environment. And yes, you end up going to Yankee Stadium on a road trip. Yes, you end up going with, but you also get the benefit of being in a familiar stadium otherwise.
Well, that's going to be interesting. I like what you're saying about these youngsters, about the familiarity of that type of stadium. And
Right.
well, without putting anything in today for the Wednesday's game, I think I hate to say Magnum. Magnum had had what, 7 of 8 at bats. He had a hit. Whoa. I mean, today is a little bit more difficult. He had Paul Skeens pitching to him today. And that's just an amazing person. I think he still got a hit during the day. There's only like 3 hits for the Rays on today's game. I think Yandy was one and maybe Belo. I'm not sure. But uh, we talk about these young guys playing in a familiar field type. What happens when they wind up actually traveling and going to a large stadium?
The good thing is that early in the season, they're mostly at home.
That's
So they're
right.
not going to do much on the road, really. So, yeah, it's kind of an intriguing way of looking at it. Well, it'll be interesting to see if it lasts.
Could you believe? I mean, we talked before about the prospects and all that. Would you have guessed that Mangum would have played as well as he has thus far, Matt?
I always knew he had the hit tool. So with
Yeah.
that to me, it's more of the power. I think the little surges here and there that he's shown. I think he's muscled up a little bit and he's gotten a little bit more of his man body going. So I think him and Cameron Meisner is one that stands at the plate, and I see a lot of Cody Bellinger in him. The
Yeah.
way he stands up straight, and he's kind of a bigger dude, and I think he's kind of changed his approach a little bit at the plate and how he attacks the baseball and how patient he is, because he used to be very aggressive early in accounts, and he seems to be laying back a little bit. So that's a change I've seen with Cameron Meisner, and
Uh,
it's benefiting him because it's allowing him to see more pitches. And yeah, both of them, like those two guys, are definitely taking hold of the opportunity that the Josh Lowe injury brought on. And that's great to see. And that's why the Rays, I mean, you want to have competition all the time. You want to make sure that you're always pushing the envelope with these guys so that they don't feel secure in their spots and they always feel like the heat is under them and they need to perform. So I think they all seem to get along too. And Johnny DeLuca has looked pretty good as well overall. So
yeah.
the outfield has been surprisingly productive, and it's helped the bottom of the lineup produce a lot of runs for the Rays.
It's exciting. And as long as we're doing parallels to as far as the field goes, Brandon Lowe's done okay. He's got 2 home runs, I think, thus far. So before today, I think that's like 40% of the games that he's played, he's had a home run. So I'm excited to see that. So I keep thinking, right field over there at Yankee Stadium. And I can't help but think of was it the first game that the Yankees played this year? And man, was it
Big
against,
loaded.
oh Lord, poor Nestor Cortes. I mean, what was it? He's up there, he's pitching, first pitch, home run, second pitch of the game, home run, third pitch of the game, home run. Those torpedo bats were just pummeling him, man. I mean, he just couldn't get it together. I mean, I felt so much for him, and that he used to play for them, if I remember correctly. And geez, I felt so bad for Nestor. I tell you.
I think he's pitching hurt. I think all of us last year saw that when he went into the playoffs, he wasn't supposed to be available. He made himself available because he said, "You know what? If I tear something, if something happens medically, I'll be fine. I'll be able to say I pushed it." And it was because he was going for a World Series win. He said it's worth it. Um, so I firmly believe that he's not at his best
Right.
physically. So just starting from that and their familiarity with him, they know the whole book wide open on him because of the time he spent with them. And he's not really a power guy. He's had to modify his routine to the point where it's almost a circus before the ball starts coming to the plate. So I mean, he's one step away from having a red curtain open and the ball just appear as and I think that's an indication that your stuff is just degrading to the point where you probably need to get whatever medical issues you need to sort it out, so that you can actually be effective. But I will say those torpedo bat issues, like, explain this one to me, Mark, because this is where I'm coming from. Okay, you spend all of spring training with no torpedo bats. No, I didn't see one Yankee use a torpedo bat during spring training. First regular season game, all of a sudden these torpedo bats come out of the woodwork. I don't know where they were keeping them. And then they're going to tell me that there's nothing special. There's nothing to worry about. No, 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 no. They're perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with these. I think what we found is the equipment version of PEDs with these bats. And so when you're at that point, you're like, okay, well, fine. They're going to give them to everybody now. Everybody's going to rack up a bunch of stats, using these bats. Ellie De La Cruz went crazy with his the first night he had it, and everybody's starting to adopt them now. And I said to somebody on Blue Sky, I was like, this is just erasing baseball history.
Yeah.
Because sure, if what you're looking for is more offense from players, and yes, they're using a bat, there's no steroids, so now the controversy goes away because they're not hurting their bodies, they're not doing something illegal, there's no rule in the rule book against it. Now all of a sudden you're getting what you want, which is more offense. Well, great. But you just erased all of baseball history. And it's even more or even worse than the base being bigger and the bases being closer together and all that stuff. Like, that was ridiculous in its own right. And that did erase the stolen base category in my mind. And so now there's the before and the after that rule change, right? But these torpedo bats, I mean, you're going to ruin pitchers' careers with these things if they keep going the way they are.
Well, we've talked before, and I think Josh, you and I too, about Rickey Henderson with, when suddenly you got larger bases and the other changes made as far as like how many times a pitcher can throw over to first, those sort of things, that changed. I mean, so all the things that Rickey Henderson achieved, they're no longer the same. I mean, you can't use the same measuring stick. These torpedo bats. Hey, what do you think, Josh?
Well, I think if Rickey had the bat, he'd drive in himself a lot more. So we'd have to see.
Bases. That's awesome.
Because Rickey was, I mean, one of my all-time favorites growing up. I mean, you got to give him, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, think about what you said, Matt, is like with the pitching. I don't know that I want to be a pitcher in this era. I mean, look at the Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, what is going to be considered a Hall of Fame pitcher at some point with all the changes, the bases, and you have these torpedo bats? There's a lot to think about because we're never going to see a 300 pitcher again. And then what becomes that stat? And then on the other side, like you guys are saying, okay, is 500 home runs going to be enough anymore to get into the Hall of Fame? It could flip both.
I think the win thing has always been ridiculous. A win is a team stat. It should not be assigned to a pitcher, and especially the way that they do it, which is sometimes a pitcher can show up, pitch 2/3 of an inning and get the win, which is absolutely bonkers to me. It's like the win is a team stat, and keep it a team stat, credit it to the team. If you even want to give bonuses out to teams for having the wins, that would and add an incentive for them to actually perform well and not tank like a lot of teams are doing. So I think there's like that whole win thing. I think for the Hall of Fame considerations needs to go away, and we need to modernize that. In terms of what they would actually go into Hall of Fame for, I mean, I think to me right now in the modern day, FWAR and BWAR are the stats that you want to hone in on, and they tell you the value because there is, in part, at least it's the first time I can think of, where it's not just your eyes telling you what the defensive value of a player is. And so we're starting to get, I know they're not perfect, anywhere near perfect, but we're starting to assign defensive value, which I think has been undervalued for Hall of Fame voting. And so I've told Mark this before, where you look at somebody like Kevin Kiermaier, probably the best center fielder of our era, right? And so defensively, And what, you're going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because he didn't hit more than a certain amount? Like there are other reasons than the bat to go into the Hall of Fame, right? So if you want to tell the story of how great defensive players were in our era, you can't do it without Kevin Kiermaier. You literally can't. Same thing with Yadier Molina behind the plate with St. Louis. Regardless of what his offensive categories are, he was just a great defensive player that should be recognized for that, right? So I think the BWAR and FWAR capture those to a certain point, and now StatCast can actually be used a little bit as well, and maybe draw some of those things into it to add a little punch.
Pardon me.
That's all good. Elevator music. Oh, sorry.
I love it. I love it. You did it before. It was perfect. Oh gosh, as this season started, opening week, there's a couple things I want to make reference to. One of them is a guy I love watching. He played just a few games with the Rays and pitched, I think, about 10 of them. Nate Eovaldi, and I love watching that guy. And he just seems to keep getting better as he gets older. I know he's had challenges in the past, but my gosh, he is absolutely amazing to watch. I mean, was it yesterday? Yeah, he threw 9 shutout innings. It's a miracle to watch that guy play. He's just the talent is exudes out there and what he's able to accomplish, and how many different ways he can put that ball across the plate. It's amazing.
I'm glad that you brought him up, Mark. And the reason, as a Rays fan, that I'm glad you brought him up is because I see his track record in terms of how he got to where he is the same way that Drew Rasmussen's been brought up. Now, having said that, I don't think Nate Eovaldi spent as much time in the pen initially as Drew did,
Yeah.
but injury history wise and stuff wise, they're very similar in terms of how they approach the game and how dominant they can be when they're on. And so when I look at the Rays using Drew Rasmussen still as a starter, I'm like I said in a message out earlier this week, like I'm crossing my fingers and toes, hoping that he stays healthy. But if there's any hope out there to say, yes, he can remain healthy if he does the right thing, Nate Eovaldi is the example, right? He had his 2 surgeries and he was able to maintain now with a strict regimen and whatever. Yes, he's had little hiccups here and there, but generally speaking, it shows, yes, you can still start despite all the injuries and make it a lengthy career thereafter. So crossing my fingers, Drew can do the same.
Oh, me too, man. I'm so concerned when you hear about those things with Drew and what Nate has achieved. Let's see, he's been since 2011. He was with the Dodgers back then. He's been since then. He's been with, let's see, the Marlins, the Yankees, us for that's what I say, 10 games with us. Boston for the better part of about 5 or 6 years, and now 3 years with Texas. But he has found ways to reinvent himself as he's gotten older. And it's just amazing to watch him. But I did want to bring him up. Now, when I think about Nate, another pitcher I always used to like who went to the Braves, and that was Charlie Morton. But don't want to talk about Charlie, but I do want to talk about that team. I do want to talk about the Atlanta Braves. Think about this. They have not won a single game yet. What is it, 0-5 or 0-6 at this point? Now, here's the other thing. It is May the 2nd. They have not had an opening day at home yet. They haven't.
April 2nd. April. Let's not get ahead.
Jeez, is there a month? Thank you for the boy. That little birdie went right through me.
A month. I was like, what am I drinking here? Is there
not enough?
Matt, we are having a heat wave down here, so I think that's why Mark's thinking we're a month ahead.
Oh, I'm thinking Derby. That's what it is, boys and girls. My mind begins the first week of May, and there's Derby. But yeah, April 2nd, and the Braves have not yet played at home, and that's gotta hurt. Plus, who have they been playing? They're playing the Dodgers, I think, right now. Let's see. Bring it up.
They're going through every single type of issue, though. I feel bad for them because they've built a nest of players that are like getting ridiculous deals from them, like the Acuna contract that they signed, all the extension, the Ozzy Albies, every single one of them was outstanding. They were always getting good value for the dollars they were spending. But just to go through the number of players, like they have Ronaldo Lopez just got surgery on his shoulder. They had Jurickson Profar get an 80-game suspension for his stupidity. Um, they had Sean Murphy, Nacho Alvarez, Ronald Acuna Jr., Spencer Strider. I mean, you're talking just between Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr., two of the best 10 players in the game that haven't played yet. So, although they're having the roughest of rough starts, they are the kind of team that can turn the tables on that season extremely quickly and still find themselves in a playoff spot. And with Alex Anthopoulos making the moves, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to shake every tree until coconuts start coming down and he gets the right one that he can actually crack open and draw some good stuff out of.
Yeah, I mean, I love to pick on the teams, but we're only 5, 6 games into the season. Well, look at this. These guys, yeah, well, but in who they playing? They talking about the Braves again real quickly. They played the Padres, and now they're playing the Dodgers, and they're not, and they haven't been home. So we expect some of that change, and certainly with all the things you pointed out, including Profar, it's like good gravy. You wake up, boys and girls. Just learn a few things about the game, what the do's and don'ts, and don't do those things. I was happy to see the Marlins are doing fairly well right now. They're looking good. So let's see what else is going on. Looking across, any team jumping out to you? Anything else, Matt or Josh?
How about the White Sox?
Oh, please tell that one. I know.
Yeah, like who saw that one coming? So everybody's been bashing on the White Sox and saying how they're done for the year. They're never gonna, go out there and win another game. And they're tied with everybody else in the Central. And they actually looked pretty good in their first couple of series. And I think the pitching in particular, when I cut it down and I looked at the Rays, because I think the Rays pitching has been the most dominant overall in Major League Baseball. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of them was they weren't allowing any walks. I think they allowed one walk or two until today when they allowed a few more. But yeah, the White Sox have just been pitching well, and so it's kept them in the games, and they rank in the top 5 in Major League Baseball to this point. And it just goes to show that, baseball, you can't judge, and the Marlins are the same thing, where they're pitching their way to competitiveness so far. So baseball is one of those games where if you play good defense and you get good pitching, you can beat anybody on any night. It's just the way that it works. And so a lot of these teams and assumptions that are made by people and preseason, they'll always tell you they know everything and whoever paid the most dollars will come out on top and the next dollars and the next dollar. That's just not how it works. So it's fun to see them have some early success and to get some of the fans back in the stands because I'm sure they know it's still going to be a rough ride. But I always like to cheer for the underdog. And to me, that's what the White Sox are this year. So yeah.
What was it? 41 wins last year, I think. My gosh. Yeah. They see them right now. What is it? Actually, if you look at the standings with them with 5 games, most everybody else there has had 6, but they're 2-3, which gives them a percentage of 400. Everybody else is beneath them. In the Central, Guardians 333, Royals 333, Tigers 333, Twins with only 1 win and 4 losses at level 200 on wins and loss percentages. And I would love to see the White Sox just come back strong. I have favorites in the American League Central. One of them is because it's traditional. I like the Royals. I've always liked them because they're a great team, and their catcher Salvador. He's always been somebody I've enjoyed watching. The Guardians, well, Cash came from there. Francona came from there. Then they've got a couple. They had who's the fellow who's been there forever? Who's the veteran player for with the Guardians?
Jose Ramirez.
Thank you.
But he's hurt right now, I believe.
Yeah, he's always been a favorite of mine. The Naylor moved on, and he's somewhere else now. He used to be with them, so. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty neat seeing White Sox up there at the top. Josh, you got any insights you want to share about any teams?
Well, being the and I'll try not to be too bad on, but I can't help it. It's the American League Central. I mean, sometimes they barely limp into the playoffs because somebody has to make it to the playoffs from that that division.
That's a fact.
I get it. I get it.
I,
Yeah.
who would you say is one of the more disappointing starts outside of the Braves?
Jeez. We're going to lean on you, Josh.
No, I don't know the answer to that because
I'd
it's
say
it's
the Red Sox are 1-4, and
Oh.
Rafael Devers has become a ghost. And so it's just one of those things that I know Mark and I and Josh, I know you probably don't know this, but we threw a lot of praise at the Red Sox when we were doing a show earlier. But it just goes to show that early on there's rust, there's a million different reasons why you could have a slow start, but they're a great example of a team that has pressure on them because that, like we said, AL Central is fine. You can have a slow start and not be too far behind. When you're in the AL East, you're in a beast and you need to have your game on. And so Rafael, I think, is feeling a lot of pressure to perform as a DH full time, and it's not always easy to change that role.
I wonder if it's something where he just says, you know what? F it. Just forget it. You're not going to be putting me out there.
He's
And
making $324 million, Mark. Like if somebody was paying me that just to hit, I'm sorry, but I would pour my heart into it.
yeah, I don't think I guess he's not sitting down this, but I don't think he's motivated either. I mean, that's a whole lot of dough, but, and I'm sure there's incentives in there to keep him making a little bit more. So I don't know, but I saw after the first few games, nothing. And he's better than that. So I don't know. Maybe he needs some spiritual guidance and an advisor that can, bring him into it. Yes.
We need that locker from what's the guy from Major League?
Oh yeah.
You need the little incense.
Jobo, Mr. Jobo, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh,
you have to give an offering of a little whiskey sniffer there, or whatever. Yeah.
We need to get a Japanese player in there to shake him up and get him out of his routine.
That would do it. Jeez. Well, I wish. Yeah, I don't want us to go down the drain about us saying great things about the Red Sox, and man, but I was a little surprised. So,
what about the extensions that have been pouring out of teams recently? The D-backs just extended Ketel Marte. Christian Campbell was extended for the Red Sox. There's a whole bunch of extensions being thrown around. I think a lot of them are surprising. Now, the one that didn't surprise was Garrett Crochet. I think the Red Sox had to do that. 6 years, 170 million. I think that made a lot of sense on both sides. It minimizes risk for the Red Sox, but it still gives them value for everything that they gave up to get him. And it gives them that frontline starter that they can bank on and kind of build around, hopefully. And I think there's a better chance they'll get full value out of him than the Yankees were going to get out of Jarrett Cole, as an example, because Garrett Crochet will be done his deal when he's 32. And the interesting part is when you look at the free agents coming around next year, it sets a precedent that they can use when they're looking for their deals. So Dylan Cease, Michael King, Framber Valdez, all those guys can now use that as a measuring stick and say, this is our baseline. And now all of a sudden, all the other teams are able to price them out. What I think you're going to see is a lot of them sign extensions with those players. So whether you're the Padres or you're, the Astros, they'll probably start locking up some of those guys with similar average annual values as what Garrett Crochet just signed for.
I think it makes good baseball sense, and I think it's good for the fans too. Especially for some of these smaller market teams. I mean, I know a lot of times we're talking about the big market teams, but then they'll just do these huge contracts whenever they want to anyway. But I think for small market teams, it's really, and even mid market, it's pretty good. I mean, it's good for the fans, and that's what it's supposed to be about, and the final analysis. But it's good for the players too. That way they know, okay, I can kind of relax, not too much, but a little bit, and kind of absorb the culture and learn where they're at.
I agree. And I think when you look at a team like the D-backs in particular, right, they just made that huge signing with Corbin Burns. They locked up Corbin Carroll, and now they have Ketel Marte signed up. So now you've got a core. And so when you're looking out and you're trying to bring in free agents and round out your team with other pieces, it's easier to attract them. It's exactly what the Blue Jays should have done a long time ago. And still, Vladdy Guerrero is not signed.
What? Yeah, jeez. That should just be embarrassing on the side of the Blue Jays not getting that done. And I think that has to put a little bit of a crimp in about how fans feel about the front office, if not about the team, if you're a Blue Jays fan. So I can't believe still that they haven't gotten that figured out, Matt.
I know where they sent that money though, because they just spent $11 billion on the rights for hockey for the next decade. So that money was well used, but it's double what they paid the last time for the NHL coverage in Canada. So it's interesting when you follow the breadcrumbs. I think the Red Sox caught a lot of flack because of Liverpool
Yeah.
and their ownership, spending a lot of money on that team. You never know where the dollars are spreading out to over time. So I'd love to follow all the breadcrumbs. That's why I find the Braves a little interesting because their books are a little bit more wide open than everybody else. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm happy the extensions are coming out. I still think there's more to come. It'll be interesting to see what the end product is in terms of how many deferrals there are, how many options. I think there's more gimmicks coming out now in terms of performance incentives, like the one for Christian Campbell. I think everybody is saying it's like a Ronald Acuna type deal because it's so cheap. I think it's 60 million that he signed for 8 years, but there's incentives that can take that up another 30 million. So it's not like it's the top. It's just it has risk involved for him if he doesn't perform, but if he gets certain things that he achieves, and I think they're fairly simple, like they're not over the top. Um, he could make out like a bandit in the end. Still gives them the control that they're looking for. I don't know. I think you're right, Josh, in that this is the way that small market teams compete, right? It's locking them up early enough that you're getting some sort of value, you're banking on them performing, and there's some comfort level and some long-term benefits to them actually knowing where they're going to be.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it makes them more tradable. So at any point in time, if you need to trade them, they have more value because now the team knows what they're getting and for how long. The Rays have done this over and over again. Just because the Rays extend a player, it doesn't mean they're keeping him forever. If anything, it means that they're going to deal him down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've got a guy we feel like we could trust. I mean, when you look at Eric Neander, you say, this guy's made great decisions. And I've said it before on the show years ago. One of the first things I remember Eric Neander doing was, I'm sorry, Longoria's going where? Evan Longoria's going where? Well, I'll never go to a Rays game again. I was hearing more and more people telling me that. I'll never go to another Rays game. But guess what? He made some great decisions, and it's still paying off the things that he's doing. So
right before the 10-5 rights kicked in, right before, like I'm talking days before it kicked in.
Amazing. No.
Yeah.
Matt, I think you're right about, these small market teams and, good for the Diamondbacks. I think it's a good decision, because they could have just sat back and it was kind of, we're talking about Longoria. It's kind of cool that he went and finished up well, with the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's worse ways for him to have gone out for sure. And I'm glad that he came back to the Tampa area and actually, spoke highly of the organization in the end. Like he's not holding, any bitter attitude whatsoever for the franchise. I told Mark this offseason when we started talking about what this season might look like, I was like, personally, I would love to see KK teaching the center fielders how to play. And I would love to see Evan Longoria become the bench manager for Kevin Cash. Like those are things that I think would help the team out because I think Kevin Cash gets kind of stuck in his ways sometimes and listens a little bit too much to the data. And I think Evan would be the sounding board that he could kind of use. I don't know what kind of work he's looking for. In this offseason, he's probably trying to keep it pretty quiet. But when they do end up building a new stadium, I still think that, if they're going to build any statues like what they have outside of Camden, the first ones they're putting up are Evan and KK, I think. Um,
Well, they already got Evan
mhm.
and they
Yeah,
got Aki.
yeah.
So to your point, I mean, I think the Rays understand what Evan Longoria meant to the franchise. And I think, on Evan's part, I think he wants back into the Rays bad
Yeah.
because, you've seen him around the stadium more, you've seen him around Tampa and St. Pete more. I mean, he's becoming very, very visible. And like you said, does he want to be a coach? What does he want to do? I'm sure that one of the things he wants to be is in the Rays Hall of Fame, and when that's going to happen, you know.
I have an idea, Mark. I know how we lay claim to Steinbrenner Field. We retire Evan Longoria's number and we put it in the outfield. What? They can't take it back after that. That's ours. No, they can't take the Steinbrenner Field back after that. There's a number 3 out there, and it's not Babe Ruth. It's Evan Longoria.
But Matt, they'll just stripe it and say it's Babes.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, it's like putting a flag on the freaking moon, and we'll make sure of that. Geez, I love that. I love that.
That's good though, Matt. That's good.
Yeah. We got to make it happen. I'm calling Stu or writing that letter. I don't know.
I just got to break off for a second. But the thing is, I'm thinking about that Steinbrenner, and it's fun watching home runs now. I mean, because we have fireworks going off in the sky, and we don't have to worry about the roof being set on fire.
But it's funny that you talk about that though, because it is more of an event now, right? Because of that. The kids will love it. The kids might stick around to the end of the game because they know the fireworks are coming. And watching it on TV, I think the white uniforms look brighter. I don't know what the grit and glow will look like in that stadium eventually, but if you're using purple lighting, if you have stuff going on, like there's a whole bunch of ambiance things you can do in that stadium that'll be a lot different than the Trop. There's not the lighting on the roof, but I think to me, there's something pure about watching baseball with an open air stadium, especially at night when it's nice and cool, or cooler, I guess, in some cases. Not exactly cool, but I think like I said, the Tampa fans are getting a first taste of that at the major league level right now, and I think the more and more and more they do, they will love it. You're talking September? Are you kidding me? September night, cool breeze, watching baseball in
Oh,
the open
yeah.
air, no issues. Like, I think that's going to be a golden opportunity for fans to get out there and enjoy it. And I hope that they're each taking a shot at it just to see what it's like and whether or not it's way different than what they had at the Trop.
It is going to be and is a different experience, and there's so many things like that they'll make it more lively. And one of the things too is I'm trying to think about the managers. I'm bringing this up. It's kind of a segue to one of the reasons Josh has joined us today, and that is looking across the history of the Tampa Bay Rays managers and Devil Rays. And there's 5 men who have held that position. Cash. Now I'm going to let Josh talk to this because you got a certain special display, I believe, at the Tampa Baseball Museum.
Yeah, Mark, one thing we're doing this month is we're going to, well, maybe we'll see how long we keep it up, but we're honoring the 5 managers, Larry, Al, I mean, and Lou, they were they started during the lean years, and then of course when Joe came in and now Kevin. But yeah, we're honoring all 5 of them by a temporary display at the Tampa Baseball Museum. So, and I guess later, whenever you want to, Mark, we'll talk about the event. I guess we can do that later on.
Yeah, let's dig just a little bit into each one of those
Okay.
managers. So let's start with the first guy, Larry Rothschild. And a lot of these guys had at least some sort of MLB career as a player, some more extensive than others. But tell us a little bit about Larry and what he
Well,
did with the Rays.
The interesting thing that people forget about Larry, and I guess it's because it was with the Rays, and like I said, it was during the lean years when they started. But it's not many people in baseball history get to be the first manager of a franchise. And I think that, that's always going to be Larry's place in baseball history, not just Rays history, but that's a very select within the select group of managers ever. Then you micromanage that group. And with Larry, like you said, with his playing career, he only played for a couple of years for the Tigers, 81 and 82. So, and then he became, obviously his managerial career was from 98 to 2001. And, with it being early in the Rays history, and we all know how kind of that went for Larry and then later for Hal and then Lou. But I mean, you look at what he did as a pitching coach, he does have 2 World Series rings. So I think that, at the 1990 World Series, which is always interesting because obviously he was the pitching coach when Lou Piniella was the manager. So it's kind of a neat connection between those two guys. And then in the 97 World Series, under Jim Leyland, he was a pitching coach, and he spent all those years with the Yankees as a pitching coach. So I think certainly he has his place in baseball history as the first Rays manager, but obviously there's no slouching there with 2 World Series rings as a pitching coach either.
They had really hard times the first few years with the Rays. And looking here at Larry's record, let's see. 411. That was the win-loss percentage. So 205 wins to 294 losses. And at one point, the Rays ownership said, no more. So what are we going to do? Well, they look at the guy. Was he the bench coach at that time? Hal McRae?
Yeah, I think he was he came in and Hal at the 2000, that started that 2001 series. Then Hal obviously assumed the role after firing Larry. And, as you talk about a player that had a good playing career, he did, with Kansas City. I mean, he started out with Cincinnati, and then, he was a Rays manager. But before that, he was Kansas City Royals manager. People may forget that from 91 to 94, that Hal was with and that's the team he kind of was best known for as a player as well. He's in the Kansas City Royals Hall of Fame, and he was on those teams where, and actually one year, kind of leads into Lou. Then in 1973 season, they actually were at Kansas City together. And then, of course, later after Lou went over to the Yankees, then of course you had Hal people forget the bitter rivalry between the Royals and the Yankees. As far as the teams go back in the day, I mean, it was brawls literally and figuratively between those two. So yeah, but Hal's career, he had an extensive career as a player, and you don't get into an organization's Hall of Fame and not be a good player. But as a manager, when he started out with the Kansas City and then on over to us, and then he was only there for a short period before Lou came in.
Yeah, because one thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mark. No,
I was just saying he had to come in behind Larry, and it's like, oh, here you are. Will you go ahead and run this? And it wasn't really even like he had a choice. Obviously, he did, but I mean, it's suddenly here is this piece of clay that's misshapen, and I'm not giving you good raw materials to work with, but I expect you to do something with it now, right in the middle of its, trying to build some kind of sculpture with it.
No, you're exactly right. And even when then after Hal, then of course Lou Piniella comes in, and Lou wanted to be there. He was going home, and I think that with things you hear from Lou and years later that, and even closer to when he was managing, that that I think we were talking earlier about small market teams and what they're willing to pay. I think that Lou was hoping for a bigger payroll for his players, and that never really materialized. So I think for Lou, I mean, and people forget he wanted to come home to Tampa and manage his hometown Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, I think the transition between managers is interesting in this case. When you start looking at those 3, so you have Larry Rothschild. So they wanted to get the pitching stabilized. They wanted that to be the focus because they had brought in some experienced bats, right? They had Wade Boggs. They had Jose Canseco. They knew that the lineup could take care of itself and score some runs, right? They didn't know how many, but it ended up being a little underwhelming because there was a lot of issues. But the pitching was what they were focusing on. So they got the manager that could help out with that in Larry Rothschild. Then they decided, well, this isn't working. Okay, we're going to try something new. And then, like you said, they brought in the guy that's got over 2,000 hits in Major League Baseball, and they were hoping that that would rub off on a lot of the teams and how it was actually constructed when they were putting the lineups together and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think either Larry or Hal were ready for all of this stuff going on and were equipped to draw the most out of their players like Lou was.
Mm.
Lou was basically throwing a grenade into the onto the field, into the Trop, and saying, okay, he's going to sort them out and he's going to start to build a character of a team. And so a lot of people always focus in on Joe Maddon and him being the change in the Rays and how they approach everything. I think it started before that with Lou in giving the team a structure and a sort of respectful way of behaving and acting and being a team and believing in your ability to perform and compete against a lot of these teams that, for a long time, I don't want to say you're looking up at them, but they have a allure that you haven't established yet in your town.
Oh man, I think you're 100% right. I think that Lou brought in, that pedigree, because Lou, whether it was whether he was playing, whether he was coaching for that little bit he coached for the Yankees, or whether he was managing, he was going to go after you. And I think that, like you said, that was, it's an interesting point that I hadn't really thought too much of, as far as him starting to change the culture, saying, okay, we're not going to let these teams, we're just going to try not to let these teams beat up on us, that we're here to win. I don't care what happened before, that I have a World Series ring. I have, as a manager, I have 2 with the Yankees as a player. He already came in and he was already 2-time manager of the year. I think, like you said, I think with Lou, the culture was going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got Joe Maddon. And then things changed again. Well, like you said, Matt, Lou threw the grenade in there. And now maybe at that point, Joe Maddon has something to work with. Maybe the floor's torn up enough that they'll bring in some carpenters and some people to let him build something. And I know, hearing a conversation with Lou Piniella, he did. He said once they didn't give him the money to get the team that he needed. And I don't know how they did so much with Joe, but Joe definitely built on everything else Lou and the others had put together. But
well, I think, Mark, part of it is the fact that, like when people come in the museum, people from around the country, they're like, well, what's the deal? The Devil Rays, and now they're the Rays. What happened? And Joe was right in line with all of that happening. You have the ownership change, and I'll tell my corny joke that I tell that my daughter says I should not tell. It's really, but it's true, because, Joe Maddon spent all those years with the Angels organization, so you have a new ownership group come in, they have an exorcism, they hire the Angel, and they make it to the World Series. And I understand it wasn't that simple, but really the culture, I mean, you have to give props to a certain degree as far as the ownership group. And the other thing, as far as natural progression in baseball, you lose that much, you're going to get number 1 draft picks.
I think the other key ingredient here, and we all know that, the managers get a lot of the blame and a lot of the glory. But Andrew Friedman came in right around the same time as Joe Maddon. And so there was a lot of benefit in the change of how the Rays drew talents to the organization. They lifted every rock from that point on. They went and actually developed their own core. And yes, they got a lot of high draft picks, but to be quite honest, Andrew Friedman's drafts were horrific. Like terrible. I mean, some of the worst in Major League Baseball based on what he had in terms of draft positions. That is not where they drew their value from.
Yeah.
Where they drew their value from was how they cherished every single asset. If they were dropping a guy on waivers, if they were doing this, if they were able to accumulate more draft picks because they were signing guys, Alex Anthopoulos did the same thing. So both those teams are culprits. They changed the rules over and over and over again because the Jays and the Rays ended up abusing the system so much that they had no choice. So all I mean to say is that Joe Maddon had more creative front office to help him out to get him those players without adding to the budget that like Lou was approaching it. I think Lou's frustration is valid, but he could have gotten it in other ways if the front office had the creativity while he was there to help him out.
Well, speaking of Joe Maddon's creativity, one of the reasons I asked Josh on the show today was for a special event that he's cooked up together. It's going to happen up at the Tampa Baseball Museum. Make sure I get the right month and date here. Monday, April 21st, and that is going to be at the Tampa Baseball Museum in Ybor. And if you could tell us a little bit about that, Josh, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, we're pretty excited about this. We had, well, JC Newman's put on an event recently where they unveiled.
That's a cigar company, right?
Yes, yeah. It's the last major cigar factory in Tampa. And they, to honor the Tampa smokers, they came out with a Tampa smokers cigar, and they were kind enough to do the unveil at the museum. So they filled the museum, and fortunately, we kept most of the smoke out of the building. We kept the people in and the smoke out as best we could. But Joe Maddon was there, and Larry was there. So it was pretty unique to have two of our 5 managers at one engagement together. So what we've done, I talked with Rick Vaughn, who is a great friend of our museum and a great baseball guy altogether and a great person. And he's written a couple of books on St. Pete and Tampa spring training. And we've had him out to the museum to do book signings. So I said to him, when I called him up one day, I said, what do you think about the idea of having you come out and Joe come out and do a dual book signing? So, Rick's like, yeah, definitely. He says, let me get in touch with Joe. And Joe was up for it. So that's kind of how this kind of came about. So, we're going to do this on the 21st. It's going to be from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. We're going to have a limited number of people. That way, you can have some FaceTime with Joe, and you can meet Rick. If those that don't know Rick, he's got, some definite books that people need to read. He's becoming a great baseball historian. So, and how their connection is that when Rick was, for all 5, and I didn't realize this until I was recently talking to Rick, that he was in the public relations department with the Rays for at least parts of all 5 of the managers. And I didn't realize it spread into Kevin Cash's tenure there as well. So, and he and Joe are very close. So I guess, it didn't take much. And Joe seemed to really enjoy the museum. It was great that you were there that night too, Mark. I mean, you kind of witnessed this too. And Larry had a great time as well. So we've invited Larry. So Larry is going to be one of our special guests. So at this point, we're going to have the book signing with Rick and with Joe, and we're going to have Larry there, which is kind of a nice bonus. But yeah, that's kind of the event in a nutshell.
Wow. So, okay, let me get this. You have Joe Maddon, and was he at least 3 times manager of the year?
Yep.
And he's also a World Series winning manager, and did great things with the Rays. We hated to see him go and win a World Series with the Cubbies, but hey, we've got him. He has his book, The Book of Joe, I believe, and
correct.
Don't suck is I think the subtitle to it, something like that. So we've got him there. You've got Rick Vaughn, who not only did marketing from the Rays from day one and through part of Cash's tenure as well, but was also there at the beginning at Camden Yards with the Orioles and had a lot to do with that as well. So he's there with his book. So I've got 2 books I'm going to get and have those guys sign them for me. You're going to have food, you're going to have beverages, and admission to the museum to see all the artifacts from players from this area. That seems like a pretty good deal. Plus, I'll use the word that the Rays use when they talk about being at Steinbrenner Field. It is in a intimate venue, if you will.
Yeah, and don't forget too, Mark. And I know you know this as well as everybody and we're doing this. Well, we're going to have 2 managers there, and we're doing it in Al Lopez's house. Who was a Hall of Fame manager. So it's kind of. I love the managers in baseball. I think some of the best characters that have ever been on a baseball diamond are managers. Whether it be, I mean, going way back, I mean, even more recently, I would say it's that like 50 years ago, but Sparky Anderson. Of course, you have Casey Stengel. You have Yogi, the supreme, I guess, mastermind of, and that's one thing. Just to interrupt myself real quick is when Joe was there, and I said, Joe, I mean this as a compliment, and I said I call you, the mad scientist of baseball, and Joe took it for exactly the way we as baseball fans mean it to be. And he's like, no, he's like, I got you. So the fact that it's kind of a manager's showcase, if you will. And one thing, just real quick, we were talking during the last event that, I was talking with both Joe and Larry about Lou Piniella. And it's one of the things that separately, they both said that Lou should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Amen.
Yeah. And it was kind of remarkable that you have these two guys, and, obviously they both spent a lot of time in baseball, and they both have World Series rings in different capacities. But it was pretty impressive to see them both say separately, that Lou should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, just a quick story about, if I can, Mark, about talking to Larry about this, because, sometimes I have to step back and be like, well, I need to rephrase this, because I was talking with Larry and I told him, I said, with this last round where Lou was up for the Baseball Hall of Fame again in the voting, that he missed it by one vote, and that Jim Leyland, he was inducted in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I said, you look at their stats, I mean, you have Leyland with a .506 winning percentage, and you have Piniella with a .517 winning percentage. Both of them have one World Series ring as far as managers. And on his first attempt, Leyland gets in as far as the error committee, and Lou the last two times has missed it by one vote. And so I said that to Larry, and he's like, well, keep in mind that I was the pitching coach on the 1990 World Series team with Lou. And then he reminded me I was also on Jim Leyland's World Series winning team in 1997. So I paused and I said, well, let me restart, Larry. I said, I don't want to, I'm not throwing shade on Jim. I said, I'm not saying that one shouldn't be in and the other should. I said, I think they should both be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And Larry's like, no, he's like, I knew what you meant. But I wanted to make sure I clarified that. And, for us at this moment too, I certainly think Jim Leyland, his baseball pedigree it's there. Yeah. He's a Hall of Famer. But I think so is Lou. And the fact that hopefully one day we'll see Lou Piniella in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But, another thing that when we were talking with Joe Maddon, it was fascinating. I told Joe, I said, you're talking about Al Lopez. And I said, with Al, I said, he is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and he doesn't have any World Series rings. Joe's like, I didn't realize that. It's interesting how baseball works, but obviously you look at Al Lopez with his winning percentage and having for a complete season, never having a losing season. So like Matt and I were talking about earlier, and you too, Mark, as far as breaking down people that should be or should not be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But, it'd be good to get Lou in there. And it was kind of interesting. I think that, you get these former managers that would agree with that.
Well, I'm glad you shared that with us, because Matt knows, I think sometimes the Hall of Fame, the whole voting thing's a bunch of hooey. The veterans, I feel a little better about. Yeah, I know I've said other things, Matt, a little stronger than that.
I love that. Hooey. Who says hooey?
I'm trying to curb my words these days. I have a young granddaughter who I'm going to be seeing soon, so I got to start using my better language, or at least softer language.
Awesome. I like it.
But we were talking about the managers, and of course, the current manager, Kevin Cash. I mean, it's interesting that as far as you look at, Kevin and Joe, as far as their manager of the years, Kevin's already got two manager of the years in 2020 and 2021, and and he's still going. And it's interesting that he's quietly become the Rays' most tenured manager, and he's also become the longest stint with any current manager and their respective teams, which is pretty impressive for Kevin. And he's still young. I mean, we have no idea what the future is going to be like for Kevin. What do you think, Matt?
Well, he's 47 years old. He's signed until 2030. So he's here until I say here. He's in Tampa or with the Rays. We sorry, let me rephrase that. We think he will be in Tampa with the Rays. Anyways, we don't know anything. All we know is he's tied to the franchise until 2030. He's got over 820 wins already. He's got a 540 win percentage. I mean, the stats are all there. If Kevin Cash doesn't get in the Hall of Fame in the same year as Tito Francona, I think we're losing out on something special because speeches from those two back to back would be elite.
Oh, I love it. I would love that, man. That would be so cool, Matt. Wow.
And you know what, Mark? One thing I have to admit that I had forgotten is that Kevin was a Ray for a minute. When Lou was there, and I have to admit I honestly forgot that. So it's kind of neat how these guys are in some ways tied together, with Kevin playing for a minute for Lou, and then as far as we talked about Larry as a pitching coach under Lou, and then Hal and Lou at Kansas City together for that 73 season, and then of course Hal starting the 2001 season as a coach for the Rays, and of course Larry being removed and then Hal taking over. So it is interesting to see how these guys kind of weave in and out of each other's histories.
Here's something to consider, Josh. Monday, April 21st, when this event's taking place from 6 to 8 p.m., the Rays aren't playing that night. So maybe there's a certain fella who went to Gaither High School, played catcher at FSU, also caught for the Red Sox, and maybe we can find that guy. Maybe he could come.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool if we could get Kevin there too. I mean, I know he's a little busy this time of year, but
you have to get him to write a book first.
There you go. God knows he'll be able to.
Nowadays you can just ask AI to write one for you and tell them what you want it to be about, how long you want it to be, whether or not it should be read to kids or not, and then you're good to go.
So I can say hooey for the kids' book.
There you go.
Cool. As long as we're talking about authors, I didn't mention earlier, Matt, Josh he wrote a book, and it's about kind of a child's book walking through Camden Yards. So with nice graphics and all that with it. So anyway, I know we need to wrap this up, but I want to thank both of you guys. Josh, give us one more time. When's the event, and where can I buy tickets?
It's April 21st, and you can go to the website for Tampa Baseball Museum, and you can check, there's a feed that takes you right there. You can actually purchase them at the museum. If people are in town and they're actually at the museum, they can purchase them directly from us at the museum. And it's going to be from 6 to 8. Like I said, scheduled as far as one of our special guests is going to be Larry is going to be there. So it's going to be kind of cool. No matter what, Joe's going to be there, and Larry confirmed that he's going to be there. And then of course, Rick Vaughn, like you said, his time with the Orioles is fascinating to me. I'm a baseball junkie, ballpark junkie. I've been all 30 ballparks.
Well, you sound like you're going to have some great guys there.
Yep.
There's going to be hors d'oeuvres, book signing, all that. So Josh, I can't thank you enough for joining Matt and I here today, man, on Baseball Biz on Deck. It's always a pleasure chatting with you all the time, but thank you for being here with the audience as well.
Thanks for inviting me, Mark. And hopefully everybody come on out on the 21st.
All righty. Matt, any other last words or?
Oh, the Bulls won 6-1, and Bobby Seymour hit a grand slam. So it was a fun time to see. I've been watching the game at the corner of my eye as we were finishing up. So Chandler Simpson hit a triple and stole another base. The Bulls are a lot of fun to watch. It's awesome. And last thing I'll say is the minor league season really kicks off on over the weekend. So get out there, support the teams, and get to know the lineups.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you both, gentlemen. And I look forward to talking with both y'all again real soon.
All right. Have a good night, Mark.
Take care.
Special thanks to Josh Weaver, curator of the Tampa Baseball Museum, for sharing stories on the Tampa Bay Rays Managers Exhibit and the special event with World Series winning manager Joe Maddon at the museum on April 21st. Just a reminder, if you enjoyed this show, go ahead, like, and subscribe to Baseball Biz on Deck. Also, you can find Matt at matgermain.b Sky Social. That's Matt at matgermain.b Sky Social, or Mark at baseballbizondeck.b Sky Social. You may also find Baseball Biz on Deck at iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at baseballbizondeck.com. Special thanks to XTakeRUX for the music Rocking Forward.